water. In fact, episode 1 is where the stunt team for House of the Dragon set a whole new world record of the most stuntmen being on fire. The naval combat section was exceptional, with Sharako Lohar's aptly named ship the Bitch Fist cleaving Corlys Valerian's flagship the Sea Snake, now the Queen Whoever Was, into two. It's a metaphor for Rhaenys' death, for the downfall of the House Valerian, for Corlys' own potential demise, and what it means for his character going forward, all rolled into one. But what really set it apart from the source material was the fact that it actually created a situation where Rhaenyra Targaryen's somewhat expected heel turn makes a lot more sense than coming out of nowhere. In the books, Rhaenyra's paranoia is built up through a string of her sons' deaths, which, spoiler alert, happens in this episode as well. But her children were a lot younger in the books at this point in the war, and somehow they still had a lot more agency. Plus, Rhaenyra doesn't exactly go sour until what will presumably happen at the end of this season. In the books, Jacaerys steps up like the crown prince he's supposed to be, reconciles House Valerian with House Targaryen in the aftermath of Rhaenys' death, and proposes that he lead the attack on the Triarchy's armada himself, with tacit approval from the Black Council. His death wasn't caused by an act of defiance, and he had a lot more backup. The show creates a subplot where Adam of Hull, Hugh Hammer, and Ulf the White are dispatched to the God's Eye by Rhaenyra to ambush Aemond as he reaches Harrenhal. Stay with us until the very end of this video because we will be getting into exactly where they were and why that matters. But episode 1 began with Rhaenyra rejoicing that Alicent was just about to hand her everything on a silver platter, while hiding this plan to ambush and kill both her sons, not just Aegon, from her. This showcases Rhaenyra's quiet ruthlessness and is also a callback to the first episode of season 2, where her only line of dialogue is,
"I want Aemond Targaryen."
Vermithor is half of Vagar's size, at least. Silverwing is almost as big as Vermithor, and Seasmoke is the fastest of all 4 dragons that were meant to fight above Harrenhal in the show. In the books, Adam, Ulf, and Hugh were also part of the Battle of the Gullet, and Nettles has been replaced by Rhaena Targaryen in the show, which we will also get to in a moment. The thing to focus on here is that in the show, Rhaenyra wanted to fly out to the Battle of the Gullet herself, but Jace commanded Sir Laurent Marbrand to bar his mother's gate and protect her from herself. Jace impulsively decides to fly to battle with his betrothed, and his inexperience is evident almost immediately. He gets hit with a grapnel scorpion bolt weighed down by an anchor within minutes of entering the fight, and his future wife has to bail him out. All the while, Rhaenyra has banged her hands on the door so hard that they're bloody with bits of splintered wood in them. She feels betrayed by Alicent, who promised her open gates and no Aemond or treachery from the Greens. She feels betrayed by Jace, who went against her wishes. Though Rhaenyra herself was coddling him to the point that it became inevitable, Jace would react how he did. And most importantly, her rage is born from circumstances that she didn't agree to. In the books, Rhaenyra agreed to let Jace go fight. In the show, she didn't. Neither did she tell Adam, Hugh, or Ulf to abandon their posts, which they ended up doing due to the reasons we mentioned earlier, and we'll cover later. When the reason behind Jace's death is revealed, Rhaenyra's turn to the dark side will feel a lot more justified and intense, because she truly did not create the circumstances that she's suffering from. She's lost 2 of her first set of 3 boys, her only daughter, and if Rhaena's flying a wild dragon in Westeros, that means she didn't go to Essos, which also means that her sons by Daemon are under threat as well. Rhaenyra's entire descent into anger and madness arc is planned to perfection, and in season 3 we'll see it reach its peak. We see evidence of it throughout the trailer, which begins with her presumably questioning Baela sharply regarding the circumstances of Jace's death. We get another shot in the trailer where Baela lands with the Dragonmont, and there are just above half a dozen people shouldering what appears to be a body behind her. The Queen keeps asking, "What have you done?" and then says, "How could you?" But we get no answers. We then see Rhaenyra bawling her eyes out in bed while Daemon, who has returned to her side, asks her if she is going to let Jace die in vain. This is the moment that will galvanize Rhaenyra's turn to darkness, and that's reflecting most of the times we see her throughout the rest of the trailer. She's looking fierce, solemn, resolute, vengeful, and everything in between. The final shot of the trailer has Rhaenyra's voiceover saying she now wears her father's crown and her enemies will not deny her her right. This is quite different from the Rhaenyra we met in the very first episode of House of the Dragon, who didn't care about her birthright nearly as much. That shift alone is enough to highlight the shift in her mindset, and she will most likely confine Baela to Dragonstone for the part she played in her son's demise before moving on to King's Landing. and once she does take the capital, well, it's not a coincidence that the show seeded the style Rhaenyra the Cruel within King's Landing in Season 2. But having brought up Baela, we need to now turn to her sister, because that's where things start getting really interesting. The interesting case of Rhaena Targaryen. So yes, everyone knows that Rhaena is the reason we didn't get Nettles, and that her being the rider of Sheepstealer creates a bunch of complications with regards to the canon events from the book. Plus, it's kind of inconsistent that Sheepstealer goes rogue and starts burning a bunch of Valyrian ships, but shortly before that, it brings Rhaena a sheep and even roasts it for her to eat alongside it. Of course, we know the thematic purpose of Sheepstealer going rogue. For the uninitiated, Sheepstealer is in the top 5 oldest dragons alive in Westeros right now list. And even though it's languishing at the bottom, that still makes it larger, more willful, and consequently more dangerous than any other Targaryen dragon. Layer on the fact that Sheepstealers never had a rider before, and you get a creature that's potentially a bigger war hazard than Vhagar, whose killing of Luke and Arax might have been unprompted in the show, but still wasn't nearly as awful as what Sheepstealer did. At least Vhagar's rider hated Luke with a burning passion that Vhagar probably sensed through the dragon bond. Baela is Rhaena's sister, and Jace her to-be brother-in-law, yet Sheepstealer chases them both and tries to kill them and their dragons. Towards the end of the Battle of the Gullet, Sheepstealer flies off into the fog, and we don't think it's going towards the Dragonmont. A big reason for that is also the fact that in the Weeks Ahead trailer, Rhaena is back in an environment that's much more consistent with the show's visual language for the Vale of Arryn rather than Dragonstone. So Sheepstealer has taken Rhaena back to the Vale, and now Baela has to not only break the news of her betrothed's death, but also deal with how she's going to frame Rhaena's actions during the Battle of the Gullet. This didn't happen in the books because Nettles and Adam of Hall participated in the battle, performed their duty, and reflected on its grim nature in the aftermath. Baela isn't the only one who saw Sheepstealer chase both her and Jace, trying to kill them and burn several Valyrian ships besides. Even if she covers for her sister, which we expect her to do, she still won't be able to silence everyone from Driftmark. And then there's the little issue of Rhaena having let 2 potential heirs to the throne go to Pentos with nothing more than a 6-soldier escort. If you align all of this information with what the books tell us about Nettles' final few interactions with the Blacks, it makes sense why the show switched her out with Rhaena. Her making these disastrous mistakes will deepen Rhaenyra's suspicious and tyrannical nature, making her question the loyalty of even her husband and her daughters. And we imagine that the show will depict her execution order for Nettles from the books by switching her out with Rhaena after she discovers her involvement in Jace's death and her defeat in the Gullet. Rhaena Targaryen finally got what she always wanted. She has a dragon now, and one of the largest, most powerful dragons, no less. But the cost could be painted as treason just as easily when you view the facts in isolation, and expect Rhaenyra Targaryen to do just that. So while replacing Nettles seemed like an awful idea at first, Ryan Condal's team has managed to pull us back in with this new Rhaena angle, and we can't help but ask you guys to focus on it in the weeks ahead of us. 2 Dragons Reborn. It was honestly hilarious seeing just how easily Larys Strong sold out Aegon to Rhaenyra's supporters at the slightest hint of trouble. But that doesn't mean that Larys intends for his king to be a captive for all his days, or be sold for ransom. In fact, what Larys does here is buy himself and Aegon time to work on an escape by suggesting their captors sell them to Rhaenyra by traveling to Dragonstone via Duskendale. Since Aegon and Larys were captured close to that port city, which should technically be under Green control, it stands to reason that they were hugging to shoreline of the Crown Lands. That path makes sense when you consider the fact that at its end lies a golden prize, and we do mean that literally. Up until now, everyone has assumed that Sunfire is dead, because that makes complete sense. The dragon fell from hundreds of feet in the sky, was badly burned, and was presumed dying even when Aegon's body was extracted from it. But the show never explicitly depicts Sunfire's death, and anything we don't see dying in this universe with our own eyes is most likely still alive. That appears to be the case for Sunfire as well, because the Weeks Ahead trailer shows Aegon reuniting with his dragon. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it's there. We see Aegon at one point laying his head next to something. If you pause that scene and focus, you'll notice what he's actually doing is hugging a dragon with golden scales. In the book, Sunfire's not on the mainland when Aegon reunites with it, but that path might have been too convoluted for the show to adapt. So instead, what appears to have happened instead is that Ryan and his team came up with a way to get Aegon to Rook's Rest, because that's where his dragon would be. And the path to that destination goes through his temporary imprisonment. We say temporary because the other thing this trailer makes abundantly clear is that Aegon won't stay a captive forever. We see him knifing a dude in the belly outside the Raven wagon that he and Larys were using as cover. We also see him telling someone, presumably Larys again, that he won't forgive Aemond or let him live for what he's done to his rightful king. So clearly Aegon's going to escape, and that will be a genuinely awe-inspiring moment, considering the immense physical pain such an effort would inflict upon him. But in the coming weeks, we'll see both Aegon and Sunfire rise again, getting stronger in each other's company until they have enough strength to do to Rhaenyra what she does to them. And yes, we do mean Rhaenyra, but the reason for that is extremely spoilerific, so we won't go into it right now. Suffice it to say, we are being literal with that last sentence, and if you were one of the people who counted Aegon out, we'd urge you to think again. Alicent had to manipulate both Aemond and her own high tower kin to get him to leave King's Landing for Harrenhal, which he does appear to do next episode. There's a shot of Alicent watching a dragon leaving the dragon pit whose wings appear to have holes in them, and then we see that same dragon flying eastward over the heads of Sir Criston Cole's army. Alicent finally gets Aemond out of the capital to uphold the first pillar of her bargain with Rhaenyra, but she also knows that she doesn't have Aegon anymore, and lacking the pretender to Rhaenyra's claim, her life, Helena's life, and Jaehaerys' life are now at Rhaenyra's mercy. In the Season 3 Weeks Ahead trailer, we hear Alicent making comments along the lines of Rhaenyra's going to take drastic measures with dire consequences now for all those who opposed her, and this will include the people she wanted to spare previously. This might go a long way in explaining why we saw Alicent and Helena running through the streets of King's Landing in the trailers leading up to Season 3, and why Alicent looks disgusted by and terrified of Rhaenyra in those trailers, and why Helena was looking terrified and upwards in the Weeks Ahead trailer. That shot suggests to us that Helena was threatened with death by dragon by someone on the black side, and she braved it like the queen she is. We're not sure if Alicent decides to escape the capital with her daughter before that occurs, or whether the escape plan is a consequence of Rhaenyra threatening Helena's life, but the one thing we can say with certainty is that her offer to let Alicent, Helena, and Jaehaerys leave King's Landing unharmed has been rescinded. Rhaenyra isn't about to trust Alicent after being ambushed by the Triarchy, losing her son, and not even getting her hands on Aegon after taking King's Landing. And yes, that's something we haven't touched on, mainly because it's fairly obvious to anyone with two eyes. So those shots of Alicent lurking around in the dark wearing a fur-lined hood, those are shots of her plotting her escape, which sadly for her, will be doomed to fail. Rhaenyra has Mysaria on her side now, and she has eyes and ears all over King's Landing. In fact, we see several gold cloaks rounding up and beating down on Kingslanders, and gold cloaks suspected to be on the Green's payroll in the trailer, and those names could have only been supplied by Mysaria. Alicent's foiled flight might have been her last chance at tasting freedom from all the constraints of her life, but alas, it's not meant to be. And what's worse is it'll end up having an extreme, perhaps even mortal effect on the life of the only child of hers she cares about, Queen Helena Targaryen.
Rhaenyra is no queen. A new dawn is coming, and she'll certainly fail.
King Aemond at Harrenhal. The fact that the show has categorized Aegon's disappearance as an abdication is wild, because the books never went that far. In fact, Aemond's lust for the Iron Throne wasn't as overt as it is in the show, and him naming himself king because his brother is nowhere to be found is just so Aemond. But he's going to keep his promise to feast his mom upon his victory, it appears to us, because it's clear that his character parallels to Daemon now run so deep they've become disturbing. They had Alicent mirror Daemon's mom Alyssa's words to him during their messed up mother-son dream sex sequence, and the results we've already mentioned earlier in this video. Aemond will also copy his Und in taking the last castle in all of Westeros, but the only difference is that he'll do it with a much more forceful hand. Daemon Targaryen is a tough man, but even he doesn't bum rush a castle in broad daylight with only his dragon as backup. Aemond will be doing that though, and we don't know what it is about the shot of Vhagar filling Harrenhal with flames from the trailer, but it looks like there's a bit of blame flame in the middle of it. and that's either a consequence of shadows or an intentional homage to the first and most iconic burning of Harrenhal by Valerian the Black Dread. We'll assume it's the latter to satisfy our headcanon, but that's not all Daemon's going to be doing at this stronghold. He's going to be killing people, and he's going to take Sir Simon Strong hostage as well. We say that because who else could he possibly be toasting in that feast clip from the trailer? Of course, Aemond thinks that Simon Strong is a traitor for sheltering and then declaring for Daemon, and now that Larys has escaped with Aegon, House Strong itself is a bane to him. He's most likely going to try to wipe it off the face of the earth, and we're not sure if he's going to heed the advice of his new witch as readily as his uncle did, because along with the Strongs, Aemond is also about to meet Alice Rivers. This is an encounter that reshapes everything about the ending of the dance, because in the books, Alice is the only person Aemond spares from Simon Strong's household, and he makes her his concubine. According to Alice, they later get married and have a child, and she apparently also has a dragon on her that she'd imported from somewhere. It's hard to verify how much of those claims are true or false, and one thing that's been confirmed through the premiere episode of Season 3 is the fact that Alice Rivers is a witch. Remember that black goat that showed up in oddly not-so-random shots throughout Season 2? Well, turns out that goat is Alice, or rather, it's an agent of hers, because she flat out calls herself a witch. She's responsible for sending Adam, Hugh, and Ulf back to Rhaenyra for a thrashing, because they abandoned their post near the God's Eye on her advice. She gave Daemon resolve in Season 2, so what will the Witch of Harrenhal give Aemond in Season 3? We suspect it'll pretty much be more of the same thing, and that Alice has seen the same future for Aemond that Helena has, but with the added twist that she isn't a fire mage, she's an old god's mage. And whether she chooses to disclose it to him or promise him that she'll help him change it, ultimately this is going to end up being an extremely complicated relationship for a guy who already has some pretty unsettling mommy issues. But speaking of Alice Rivers and the old gods, the God's Eye. One of the biggest questions every fan from the Song of Ice and Fire community had when House of the Dragon was announced was whether we get a faithful interpretation of Adam of Hull's story. That's because he's only the second person to have visited the Isle of Faces in the middle of the God's Eye, which is where the Green Men live. In fact, we think Ulf, Hugh, and Adam's camp in Episode 1 was on the Isle of Faces, and that's because three very odd things happen in quick succession. When Alice appears in goat form while Ulf is taking a dump, Hugh, who's near the God's Eye shore, is startled by a snarling sound. He pulls out a knife, turns around, and sees an antlered creature covered in fur clip-clopping out of sight. Then when Ulf and Adam return, Alice appears, warns them about the gullet, and we hear the snarling again. Ulf immediately rushes towards his dragon, and Hugh is unsettled as well. But Adam is the important one in this context because he's the one who will be talking to those antlered men before this series ends. Possibly even this season. You see, in Fire and Blood, a series of events unfold that lead to Rhaenyra becoming so paranoid that she starts seeing traitors everywhere, including in Adam, who has done nothing but follow her word, be faithful and grateful. He will seek out the Green Men on the Isle of Faces and use their wisdom to make his next move, which changes the entire course of the war. It's not an exaggeration to say that Adam Valerian was Rhaenyra's most loyal man until the end in the books, and his future was decided by the antlered Green Men we've seen on two separate occasions now, the last time being in the final episode of Season 2. Seeing the Green Men would confirm so many fan theories and spawn so many new ones that maybe everyone will get their minds off of Winds of Winter's release date for a collective minute. And while this isn't in the trailer, this plot point is what we'll be looking out for the most in the weeks ahead.
My enemies will not deny me my right.
Betrayal and the battles of the dance. And finally, no war is ever complete without a few cloaks turning, blood being shed in mud, on stone and across creeks, and battles that live on in history, song, and infamy. Let's start with the couple of battles that we know are going to happen for sure. The first is the battle on the Honeywine, which is where we'll see Ormond Hightower in all his haughty, scheming, perfume-sniffing glory. All the promotional material for this season has built up Ormond as this political and military mastermind that's always 5 steps ahead of his enemies. He is somewhat right in his assessment that Rhaenyra isn't qualified or liked enough to rule over the realm, or will be by the end of this season. He runs a tight ship considering his camp layout is immaculate, and Tessarion, which is Prince Daeron's dragon, is transported by keeping her between a circle of spears when encamped is indicative of Ormond's wealth of strategic knowledge. But the way that he's cutting down someone in the Weeks Ahead trailer suggests that even he has a breaking point, and we're going to assume that begins with the Battle of the Honeywine. This is a battle where the High Towers were being attacked, and in the books, Daeron's arrival on Tessarion is sudden and decisive. In the show, it looks like Ormond will be using Daeron's dragon strategically, because he always keeps Tessarion on display, but he never lets Daeron see the light of day. Anyway, getting back to the point, as you can imagine, a single dragon in an all-human army battle can be a major advantage, and Ormond should face little resistance in his march towards King's Landing. We know this is going to happen because he told his buddy Jon Roxton, aka Bold John, that the weather's going to remain the same. The context here is Ormond's marching orders. He fully intends to disregard them, and in the books, he goes on to take 3 more Black-aligned Reach castles and towns. It's the third one we're looking forward to seeing the most, because it is one of the bloodiest battles in Westerosi history, and that stretches back thousands of years. After the battle on the Honeywine, he takes Long Table, sacks Bitterbridge, and then attacks the town of Tumbleton. That's where his army is marching through the Weeks Ahead trailer, the town with those unique stepped roofs. We think Bitterbridge might not be involved in the show, considering Aegon II's second son, Maelor, was cut out of the show. But we wouldn't complain if Ormond went from the Honeywine straight to Tumbleton. That's because this city is where everything starts falling to pieces for the Blacks and even the Greens. In order to defend the city, Rhaenyra sends out a few select of her new dragon riders, charging them to protect her citizens and burn her enemies. But instead they go over to the enemy, and it's because their price is a lot better than an empty title that you can't sleep in or drink. Vermax was the first dragon to die in Season 3, but he isn't going to be the last by a country mile. And if Season 3 actually goes beyond Ormond's capture of Tumbleton, which they've already set up by introducing Jon Roxton, who's part of a group called the Caltrops that tries to settle the leadership crisis that the Hightower army will be facing by the end of this war. And before this battle goes down, Sir Criston Cole will march towards doom and annihilation. His words, not ours, during the Butcher's Ball. In fact, that's going to happen before the Tumbleton stuff, just because of the geography, and it looks like the show has kind of mashed together the Battle of the Red Fork, the battle at Acorn Hall. It only happens because Aemond finally shows up at Harrenhal and decides upon his next course of action. Notice how we said we? That's because Aemond will do what he always does and listen to his ego instead of thinking with his brain. He knows that Lord Ormond's army is marching towards the capital to reinforce it, and he knows the right course of action should be to go south with Cole's army. But Aemond wants Daemon, and this thirst for blood will end up costing the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, in the Butcher's Ball. Criston Cole has been walking around like a ghost, just waiting to be exorcised throughout Season 2, and it appears as though he'll be getting his wish.
You can kill us. You will never make us embrace her.
But as for this video, we're afraid we're going to have to kill it there, because that's all we've got for you guys today. Let us know your thoughts on the House of the Dragon Season 3 Weeks Ahead trailer and our breakdown of it down in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Westerosi content this summer. And we'll see you guys real soon. Until then, stay safe and have a great day.